Hi, everybody. I have beautiful white Fluffy here with me because Chocolate now makes it a big game on Wednesday nights. He's really something. He's just a fascinating creature to be with. Fluffy is much more calm and much more funny, and sometimes it is like living with two creatures that are teaching me how to relate to something that is not human, but almost in a telepathic way. And that is my theme tonight. I'm going to put my telepathic Fluffy down on the floor. Telepathy. I have been concentrating on it for the last 2 or 3 weeks because I am working on a big in-depth story about a man named Terry Lovelace. And for those of you who have checked at Earthfiles.com, you will see that tomorrow night on Coast to Coast AM, when I do my end of month 3 hours, that I'm going to open up with fast radio bursts. That is a huge cosmic mystery, and they keep coming. And now we've got a second repeater. And if something is repeating, whether it's 3 billion light years away or wherever it is, if it's repeating, it means it's not being destroyed by this massive quantity of energy that is picked up, equivalent to 500 million of our suns. And it happens in milliseconds, and there's no afterglow. So I start out tomorrow night on Coast with an interview with one of the discoverers of this new repeater in the fast radio bursts. And then I'm going into one of the most fascinating abduction accounts, I think, in the 40 years that I've been trying to get to the bottom of animal mutilations and human abductions and all things related to the question, are we alone in this universe? If there are alien intelligences, why aren't they here interacting with us directly? Why does everything seem to be behind the scenes or underground or on the moon or Mars or beyond? And in this story of Terry Lovelace, it's the book that has come out that he wrote to tell his story is called Incident at Devil's Den. This is a fascinating park. It's a state park in Arkansas. And his story begins all the way back to June of 1977 with an Air Force buddy. They were both at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, and across the border, he was going to this park. Keep that date, June 1977. What happened to them? In the 3.5 hours that I'm laying out tomorrow night, and I'll have all of my in-depth reports with images and illustrations and a lot of things at Earthfiles. But here is one of the first statements of this remarkable saga. He goes from 1977 June all the way to October 22nd, 2013. About 5 years ago, plus some days. No memory. He had dreams. He had nightmares. He had no coherent memory of anything between 77 and 2013. And what is it that provoked a flood that started coming into his brain? He had collapsed the day of October 22nd, 2013. His right leg was literally now not operating. He couldn't walk on it, couldn't stand on it. He's taken to an emergency room at the Veterans Administration in Dallas, Texas. They take him into a radiology room. They took, he thinks, 24 x-rays having to do with his right leg and the thigh above the right leg. And what has transpired in the evolution of trying to do the interview with Terry about all of these events and his sudden avalanche of memory, is that I feel like today and yesterday and the day before, like in the last week, that I am returning to what I have written about and have reports at Earthfiles that I call starting down this hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor. And tonight, I thought I would try to show you just a little bit about how difficult it is to do these investigations and why, even when it comes to what you would think would be hard evidentiary x-rays that should stand up in a court of law. And here's sort of where it began. When we did the first recorded interviews, Terry said they took all these x-rays, and he had some x-rays that did not have what is called metadata on them. So they're x-rays, but they didn't have his name, they didn't have the date, they were just fascinating x-rays. And I started talking to him about the fact that this is one of the strongest cases in the human abduction syndrome that I think I've ever encountered in terms of x-rays that show what appear to be anomalous objects in his right leg without clarification or identification by the radiologist who back in 2013 wrote up the radiologist's conclusion about what they were dealing with. And that in that process, 24 x-rays, Terry thought, a formal conclusion that would go into his medical file, and that the only x-rays that Terry ever did get a month later, when he became very concerned about the implications of the x-rays and his memory starting to come back about this huge triangle, a block long, 5 stories high, that came over him and his Air Force buddy in that park. And it all starts beginning to come in pieces. And he realizes, my leg, my knee, did those, what he calls aliens, did they put something in my leg? And that's where the radiology office in the VA had shown him. And I'm going to start now and ask Brad to show x-ray number 1. And I'll try to help guide you. We are showing an x-ray, and you cannot see the metadata on this. It's at the top and the bottom, but we did end up today, for the first time, getting the x-rays where we had the name, the date, October 22nd, 2013. And I'm sorry that, is there any way, Brad, to lower or raise so that we could show what the metadata actually looks like? And this is this cropped, or can we see the actual metadata? Because this is what I've been fighting for. I said if we could get these x-rays, and we had 5, and we could get the metadata, there, we're starting to get metadata. This metadata shows that these x-rays were taken at 6:39 p.m. in Dallas at the VA on October 22nd, 2013, that the patient was Terry Lovelace, and this is his right leg. That's really important. The x-rays without that information, it was bothering me that we didn't have the metadata, and that's what we've been working to get. And this afternoon, a couple hours ago, is when we finally had that breakthrough. Now, in this x-ray, are we now, we've got the metadata. Let's go back down and show them the floret, the petal that is in there. And that it's, yes, can you now see that? We need to be able to show that it is the first one. There we go. That's what we want to look at. is the green. Yeah, here we go. So this afternoon, when we finally were getting help with how can we get these x-rays with the metadata, I got in touch with a radiologist I've known for a very long time, and we got this in a DICOM format that the, let's say the VA would use, and people transferring x-rays and private things around hospitals, they would put it in this DICOM format, and you have to have software to open it up. So my radiologist friend in New Orleans, who's been a crack radiologist for 35 years, we got these to her. She was able to open them up. That's why we have the metadata. And then I said, can you look at this one with this, what looks like a 5-petal flower? And she immediately said, well, I think that that has the characteristics of a Baker's cyst. Those are little sacs of tissue that will fill up with fluid, and then minerals in the body will sort of distill out, and then they will form like little rocks. She said, in this particular case, she had not seen a Baker's cyst that had this form of geometry before, and that was noted by the radiologist back in October 22nd, 2013. The radiologist himself had noted that this was an unusual geometry for a Baker's cyst. Now, let's look at number 2. We're going to come in from the side. When you look at that, unless you knew about the front image, you wouldn't understand that this was related to that floret pattern. Now let's go to number 3, which is the camera is faced to Terry Lovelace from the front. So his right leg, as we're looking, it would be our left arm or left side as we would look. But his right leg is the one that would be on the left, even though it's his right leg facing us. And you can see right down by the knee. Can you go into that tighter shot, Brad? Good. That too, taken from the front, this is part of that floret object. With these 3 x-rays, we could see, a radiologist could see, that there was 3-dimensional structure, and that this probably is in the category of a Baker's cyst. But back on October 22nd of 2013, it was left open that this probably was a Baker's cyst. That night, they also took x-rays, probably trying to get 3-dimensional orientation on what was going on in his leg that failed so badly. Now, Brad, let's go to the next. And what we need to do is go in. That's the one that is taken from the side. We need to go to the metal square. Okay. This strange object is only on one of the x-rays that Terry has ended up with from going to the VA Medical Center. Today, when the radiologist was going through now with the metadata and came to this photograph, she said, where are the other x-rays? First question. And what I've just shown you is why getting multiple x-rays around a leg, an arm, a body becomes crucial when you're trying to understand, do you have something anomalous or do you know what it is? And when she saw this photograph and said, where are the other x-rays? We come to one of the reasons why I'm in a hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor, simply trying to get hard data that would hold up in a court of law. And here is what she said. If you don't have multiple x-rays on this odd object, then you can't tell exactly. Could it be an artifact that was put there in the VA radiation room? Is it something that has structure? Where is it in relationship to? And she was talking about cutaneous and subcutaneous layers. And the answer to her very specific and professional question, which is the right question to go to immediately, was that Terry had never gotten any other x-rays. This was the only one. And we talked today that the implication would be if 24 were taken and he's got 5, then it means that we have several that are missing. And then the question is, in those x-rays that Terry doesn't have, could it be that the information that a professional radiologist would immediately request and would want to see, a bunch taken going around, we don't have? Now, one of the reasons why this has come up is that within the first week or so, after October 22nd, 2017, when Terry was trying to cope with this leg that wouldn't work and didn't know what had happened at all. And remember, it was not until that day that any memories started coming back. But over the next several days, he was starting to have pieces come in dreams. He was very upset. And then the question is, what's wrong with my right leg? Does it have something to do with what they did to me on that craft? And suddenly the context for the anomalies come into play, and he goes to where his records should be at the VA, and there was one record that got replaced within a few days, and it set him off on the question, I want to have my x-rays, I want to see these. And it took him a month, but instead of getting 24, he was given 5. And they had no metadata on them. It's taken all this time and the work and effort since I started working with him to see if we could get the metadata x-rays that would prove that he was at the VA Medical Center on October 22nd, and that these were x-rays in which a radiologist had said, the floret is unusual in the geometry, the object in the thigh that we were just looking at is made of metal. It is clearly something that has been made, and I think the letter was man-made, has 2 wires going up from it, unknown, unidentified. The next, over the last 4 or 5 years, a whole series of events have occurred that we'll go into on Coast tomorrow night, and that if Terry were sitting here, he would say that what he's begun to understand as a patient, as a person who starts recovering memory, remembering that the communication with him was telepathic, that he is left in a landscape that is so hard to pin down what are the realities if even the x-rays taken of a leg in which he had no memory or association might actually have an alien implant that showed up and he has one x-ray, where are the other x-rays? And how does this occur in the United States of America if the VA cannot guarantee that a medical record that gets posted or x-rays that are delivered to a veteran will not be tampered with? Because one of the reasons that Terry wrote this new book, Incident at Devil's Den, and is willing now to talk with me in an interview for a long time and is going to start doing conferences, is that he said, I feel like there are other people who have deep knowledge about what is going on with people like me, and I had no memory. It's as if I had amnesia for 3 decades. And then x-rays and a leg start everything coming back. And I want to know, did I have an implant from whatever took me in the beam? And adding to the complexity of this, showing why these kinds of investigations are like entering a hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor. In 2017, approximately 4 years after the VA in Dallas in the x-rays, out of the blue, without knowing how it happened, Terry ends up having what appears to be some kind of a face-to-face interaction with a being other than human. And the being warns him, you are talking too much. Don't talk about these x-rays. If you continue to talk about the x-rays and do a book, then those that I'm associated with will come and take it from you. And here is the final kicker to all of this. We've been talking about what's on the x-rays and the strangeness. Those radiologists in Dallas were convinced that somehow something, for both of the anomalies, that something must have happened and that Terry had forgotten and that there must be scars from where these 2 implants were. And they did surface tests, they did subcutaneous, having to do with another radiogram, and they finally concluded there's no scar tissue. There's no scar tissue in either of the places where we have found these objects in the x-ray. We don't understand that. We can't explain it. In 2017, after this dialogue with whatever this entity was coming to warn him that he must not talk about this or show these x-rays, or they would be taken from him in his leg. One morning, he wakes up with terrible pain in his body, and he said, I knew they were gone. And he went to a chiropractor friend and said, I want you to do x-rays on my right leg. And everything was gone. He said, what do you suppose those objects, if it's just the one with the square and the wires, does somebody in our government with a long track record of investigating UFOs and ETs for the last 70 years or so, did they recognize something? Did they say, we know what that is? There go the x-rays. We can't allow people to see this. Why? What is it? What was it that was sensitive in the discussion? And finally, all of this in the Hall of Mirrors with a quicksand floor comes to a headline this month. Quote, this technology from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, can beam a voice right into your head. This is an article. It is dated January 28th, but the release of the information from MIT was on Friday, January 25th. It was published in the journal Optics Letters. And I thought that I would just excerpt this because so many things are beginning to wind together as if we are at this time in the intersection between a world that has been totally concocted and lied to, coming into a world that seems finally that we're getting bits and pieces of real truth. And that in the last 70 years, our government in China and Russia and probably a lot of other places have been trying to get alien technology and back engineer it and apply it into our current world. And as Terry said, wherever he was taken, everything was telepathic, and that when the being sat across from him, he said it was just like listening to any human voice, but I knew that it was in my head and not coming through my ears. Listen to this breakthrough at MIT in this paper published on Friday, January 25th, Optics Letters. The MIT team describes how it developed two different methods to transmit tones, music, and recorded speech via a laser. Both techniques take advantage of something called the photoacoustic effect, which is the formation of sound waves as the result of a material absorbing light, using lasers to beam music, voices, sounds, frequencies right into the human brain. This continues, quote, "They believe further research will allow them at MIT to scale up the transmission distance using light to put clear sound into the brain, which could make the techniques useful in dangerous situations, such during a mass shooting. Authorities could beam instructions directly to individuals without anyone else hearing them. We hope that this will eventually become a commercial technology," said researcher Ryan M. Sullenberger. "There are a lot of exciting possibilities, and we want to develop the communication technology in ways that are useful." And then the article goes on into, where are we in today's world? Here, I'll just hang this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what it's like to be in the Hall of Mirrors with a quicksand floor. You never know what's going to happen next. And in this process of trying to help you understand where I've been, getting phone calls, whether I'm doing Phenomenon or doing YouTube or wherever I am, is another part of my life now. They come all the time. But coming back to this idea, people in various parts of the world, going back at least to World War II, if not before, and certainly coming up into the 21st century, like Terry, the communication that they have had with beings that fall into the category of non-human, not looking human, whether tall, short, scaly, rubbery, blonde, whatever they have been, the main source of communication has been telepathy. And Terry describes it very well. And now, as we move into New Year 2019, a technology is now right there on the horizon through MIT, in which light could be used in a beam to put thoughts, music, numbers, communications directly into a human brain. Working with Terry for the last 3 weeks, interviewing people who are having current animal mutilations. I'll be doing reports about that upcoming. Working with whistleblowers on a variety of subjects that range from Antarctica to the moon to Mars to technologies that are, to their description, are so advanced that it's very hard for a normal human mind to realize that around us, underneath the surface of our planet, inside and on the moon, under the surface and on the surface of Mars and beyond, are the evidences of alien intelligences that have been able to manipulate the surface life of Earth so easily, because they have had beams that neutralize gravity and they can lift anything. They obviously have the ability to put thoughts directly into human minds. They have the ability to project holograms. And one of the interesting subjects that has come up in trying to do the Terry Lovelace incident is that even some of the medical people who are behind the scenes working for agencies, when something anomalous comes up on an X-ray, like what looked like a 5-petal flower, and it may very well be a Baker's cyst, but that you have radiologists in 2013 and a radiologist today on January 30th, who both say it's probably a Baker's cyst, but we have never seen that kind of geometry before. And I was talking about that with a person who has medical knowledge behind the scenes dealing with human abductees and the alien presence. And they said to me, you know, we have had evidence that we're dealing with intelligences with technologies that they can make a transmitter. They can make one of their technologies that they implant in a human body look like a piece of bone. It will come as like muscle tissue, or it could be that it will end up sort of camouflaged as a Baker's cyst in a knee, but it might just have a little more precise geometry. But in the world of medicine and busy digital lives that everybody has now, it will hardly be noticed that the geometry might be unusual because it's something else. But that metal square with those 2 wires, identified as metal in 2013, described as anomalous and man-made, inserted into the right knee region of Terry Lovelace. And there were no surface scars. There's no evidence of any intrusion into where that metal object was, or in the floret. If it's a Baker's cyst, it wouldn't have a surface scar, and that could explain that one, but not the metal and the wires. Well, that comes to also a fact that as you go into the hollow mirrors with a quicksand floor trying to investigate these phenomena and trying to do it with facts and science, that's where you begin to find over and over again that we're dealing with the ability of a technology to work at the molecular level. This came home to me in a discussion that I had with a current modern laser specialist, laser surgery specialist. We were talking about animal mutilations. I was showing him photographs over the last 70 years or so, 50 years, and how there's no blood, no tracks. And we got to the part about how many cases the whole huge heart from inside, whether it's a bull or a cow, when they go in to do a necropsy, they will discover that the big huge heart is missing. But there's no surgery. There's no surgical excision anywhere on the body of the animal. I've talked about that with you guys before on the YouTube channel. And so when it comes to disappearing organs from inside animals, it has included the bladder, esophagus, trachea. There have been many pieces where bladders are removed and there's no abdominal surgery there either. And that the doctor said to me, you know, this is one of my dreams, molecular specific surgery. He said, I would love to live to the day when we are able to take frequency, and all I want to do is take out a piece or nodule or maybe the gallbladder. And we'll be able to have a beam, and it will go through the skin, the cartilage, the bone, whatever else is in between, right to the gallbladder. The gallbladder molecules will be the only ones that will interact with this molecular frequency scalpel. And then we would be able to do it on all parts of the body, and there would not be the trauma of surgery, the blunt cutting, the issue of bleeding, all of that. It will be bypassed. And he said, Linda, there would be no scars. So, what is one doctor's dream today in 2019 for a molecular specific surgery may be what was applied to Terry Lovelace back in June of 1977 on a big craft during an abduction, and that he knew nothing until his right leg gave out in 2013. And then we have a discovery, but instead of him having 24 x-rays that he thought were taken, he gets 5, and they didn't have metadata. And he and I do an interview, and I'm trying as hard as I can to keep documenting things at the level of the details. What could we get? How can we prove in a court of law? And look at what we have discovered. And today, when that radiologist immediately said, where are the other x-rays? She doesn't know anything about the rest of the story. She just meant, if you're seeing an anomaly like the one that, Brad, can you go back? Can you go back to showing one more time close up? If you have an anomaly like this, someplace in your body, and a radiologist says that is, you can keep it up, and the radiologist says that it's metal, and you don't know where it's come from, that the one thing that all of us should be trying to do is say, well, I want to make sure I've got multiple x-rays, and I want to make sure that they're all named and dated and that I have a copy. So in this opening tonight on my YouTube channel, it's sort of like I took today and going back a few days of everything that has happened to try to share with you that the Hall of Mirrors with a quicksand floor, that title really sums it up, how difficult it is to get to the bottom of these phenomena and prove it. And maybe on the other side of that headline that we're always talking about, that we're not alone in this universe, that, like Terry, he spent a good part of his professional life after he was in the Air Force. He went ahead and got a law degree. And he said, when my memory started coming back, at first you don't want anybody to know. And then, Linda, it begins to dawn on me, as it does on other investigators and people in the abduction syndrome. If we can't tell each other, nation to nation, nation to citizens, citizens to citizens, professionals, if we can't talk with each other about the real truth, the real facts, see real metadata, see real physical evidence, know that technologies exist that are way beyond us, then we are dooming ourselves to live on a planet of lies. And that would probably be our existential fate. If we switch gears, and like Terry, who is now coming forth, and he says it's scary at times, but he's putting his name, he's putting the story on the line, even though he's been threatened, even though there are helicopters that zoom around his house, even though he feels like he's one of the, we'll call them followed people. He feels the same way that I do. It is so far past time that all of us have to be telling the truth about what we experience, what we see, what data we have, to try to move this ball down the court to a planet that starts dealing with facts, the real relationship with alien intelligences in this universe, good, bad, or indifferent, and that Terry Lovelace is one of millions. And for me, in a career that started with a strange harvest in terms of a career focus on what is behind abductions and what is behind animal mutilations and why government policies of denial and all of the documents that have threatened and people who have been working in our government or in military, and they say that they've had to sign non-disclosure agreements and that how they would be punished if they talk, and that the only way that you get any insights is with whistleblowers who are risking their lives. Why should it be like this? Can't we just all decide together as a planet, no matter what, we're going to address this issue straightforwardly? That we're not alone. We were probably made genetically by other intelligences that use this planet like a laboratory. They monitor, they watch, they analyze, they harvest. There's a relationship between some to us humans. There are hostilities from others to us humans. There are others that are neutral. And if we knew all of the truth, maybe we would stop trying to kill each other on this planet. And on that sober note tonight, what I'd like to do is to transition to questions, and Lori is waiting to give some questions, but to answer one of the more frequent questions that I have gotten since last week. We debuted one part of what will be an evolving and multiple part and eventually an hour whistleblower documentary that I will release hopefully later this summer. But one of the questions is, Linda, do you have proof that the backlighted, voice-altered man in your video is in fact a Navy SEAL? It's been 2 years. 2 years of working slowly, piece by piece. And I want everybody to know that this person is who they say they are, and that I have other whistleblowers who are coming forward, and they are providing me also with records, and that what I am going to put in these whistleblower segments, to the best of my ability, will be the people that I have matching photographs, documents, and I know that they are who they say they are. But even they, even the whistleblowers, will joke with me and say, if you think that you have walked the hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor, Linda, what we go through is unimaginable. Keep that in mind when whistleblower video that I'm going to release, that some of these guys have been in extremely dangerous places, weird places, interacting with all kinds of high strangeness. And they feel that all of their fellow human beings should know about some of this. And that's why I'm working on Antarctica. And as the year unfolds, Brad and I are going to try to do a segment a month, and that in February will be another, and March, and so forth. And I want to thank those of you who have emailed me and written me that you have your own professional technical knowledge that bears on the facets of what we presented in part one about huge structures deep under ice in Antarctica. There are people who are communicating to me, even though they cannot be made public yet, and it is reinforcing. There is a huge, huge story that will keep unfolding probably for decades about the true relationship between ancient Earth, the moon, Mars, and beyond. And I find that one of the most exciting pieces in my life now. I want to understand it all. I want to know it all, the good, the bad, the neutral. And if we're going to start building a base on Mars and a base on the moon, and humans might already be there, is what I'm being told. You, me, all of us on Earth, we're going to enter into a whole new catch-up. This is going to be a zone of catch-up. How are we all going to catch up to centuries of manipulation and lies and find all of the truth as fast as possible so that we can begin to stand on our own human ground and start exploring, just like Star Trek. So, on that note, you guys, thank you for listening to this sort of why it's so difficult to do this work in the first place. And now I would love to hear your questions, Lori. Thank you.
Great. So here's the first question. Could this be a tracking device in Terry's leg?
It might be. To lift up the iPhone so that, is that get the audio better. Brad is suggesting something here, and I've decided that when we have things to do, I will just go ahead and break in so that you guys can hear Lori better. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Do you want me to go ahead and repeat that just in case?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Could this be a tracking device in Terry's leg?
It could be tracking. It could be uploading information, downloading information, monitoring inside of a human body in ways that none of us have understood. Let me give you an example. It goes all the way back to around the year 1991, I believe. It was 91 or 92 in Philadelphia. And there was a meeting of a few of us investigating in the human abduction syndrome about implant investigations. There were medical doctors there. Robert Bigelow was there, who has now the head of Bigelow Aerospace. He had a great interest in human abductions. He was there with Prince Hans Adam from Europe. Those two men had put up the money for a Gallup poll. And the Gallup poll is in a booklet. It's very good. I reference it even to this day. And it was, if you took a sampling of Americans up to a certain number and you ask a whole suite of questions, that it would be predicated on the idea that you could learn how many people in the survey probably fell into a category of the human abductee. So that was the context within which we had this meeting in Philadelphia. And a researcher from the University of Michigan presented a fascinating study of an implant that had been taken out of a particular abductee. And that particular scientist is always asked not to be identified, so I'm honoring that. What he showed us were photographs of the surgery that went in to get what they knew was some kind of a object in the abductee, and I believe it was in the leg also. And he showed what it looked like that when they got into the surgery, there was this rice, like a grain of rice, sized little object. It looked exactly like the surrounding leg tissue. Color, texture, everything. But it was like, whatever it was, it kept itself like a little island. It was like an island separated from the rest of the leg tissue. And when this researcher put up the slides, he went into how he had been able to do analysis of what was this little separate island thing identified as an implant. What was it made of? It was made of exactly the same percentages of carbon, phosphorus, and the 5 main elements that make up life. And that the separation, they didn't understand why it could be so contained, separate from the muscle tissue, but it was definitely exactly made of the same tissue. And I remember when he made the presentation, he raised the question to all of us in the room. If we are dealing with alien intelligences that can manufacture some kind of extremely sophisticated monitoring device, medical device that's measuring things that we don't know, and it can be made of exactly the element that would be in muscle tissue or in any other part of the body, we would never be able to know unless somebody has an experience, an event, something occurs, a doctor does an examination, or in this particular case, I remember, it was something about an irritation. You will hear abductees say, I always was scratching the same place, or Terry Lovelace had this place on his right knee. It was always going numb when he did exercise. If he ran 2 miles, he said it was just like somebody in a dentist's office put a needle and anesthetized that part of his knee leg. So there can be these eccentricities biologically that humans will start to identify, I have a spot. And then that could lead to an investigation. But if you take the big box of everything that happened in that meeting in Philadelphia, it was that sophisticated monitoring, tracking, all kinds of devices with some kind of assignment, mission, that we wouldn't understand, but that something that interacts with our planet all the time is working at that sophisticated level that we couldn't even tell the tissue of an implant from the tissue of the leg. I've never forgotten that, and that, Lori, is why that question, could it be a tracking device? It could definitely be a tracking device, or it could have a function that is beyond our comprehension.
The next question is there a chain of custody for the X-ray series that we're viewing this evening?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for adding that phrase. When I started asking Terry, I said, I really like chain of custody that will take things back to their origin point and they can be proved. That's why I wanted to see metadata. Remember, it started with, he had the 5 X-rays, but they didn't have any metadata on them. And so I said, if you were in that Dallas Veterans Administration radiology office lab on October 22nd, 2013, then we need to see that on the X-rays. Now, here is another very important footnote to show how people get so afraid of telling the truth about dates and timelines because they're so afraid that they'll lose their job, or their family will be affected, or relatives will be affected if they give the real dates and the real times, and that really turns investigations into scrambled eggs. Terry has stepped up to the plate on this one. And he said, I have permission to say this. I have permission to clarify this. In his book, Incident at Devil's Den, he used the date of 2012 instead of 2013. And there are other dates that he moved around in the book, and he said, I was afraid. Well, now he's going to do another edition, I believe, and he's going to correct all the dates. And this has been forced because I said, if we're going to use and show the X-rays of the metal anomaly and the question mark on the geometric Baker's cyst, we have to have chain of custody. It has to go right back. It has to be there, not altered. It has to be real. Dallas, Veterans Administration, the radiation lab, and that all the information is there, and these are legitimate metadata, his name, his social security number, which we took out, the date, October 22nd, 2013, 6:39 p.m. in normal Central Time. We found that some of the other X-rays that were done as apparently later copies, they changed 6:39 to 18:39. That's military. So noon plus 6:39, 12 and 6, that's 18:39. So it's the same time on differently generated X-rays, but it's in military time or what we call normal time. So you can find variations like that. Chain of custody is so important that if you think back over the last 2 to 3 years of stories that have emerged in which, if they had done chain of custody back to origin points, if there's something that is supposed to be highly anomalous and highly strange and it is found someplace on this planet and it is introduced, let's say, in a TV studio, but it's supposed to have been dug up out in a desert or on a mountaintop or in a river valley, you don't start the story with somebody saying, here is where it was found. You have to have chain of custody going back, hopefully photographs, videotape, witnesses, to exactly the spot and be able to dig exactly in the site where something that is being introduced allegedly came from. Otherwise, in this planetary civilization we're in now, we're every day, where we hear about fake news, and the hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor is so difficult to work in the first place, because you have alien manipulations, alien holograms, alien telepathy, alien manipulation of minds. Then you jump over to humanity, and we are struggling with all kinds of false presentations in commercials, in people trying to make a fast buck, and on and on and on it goes. So I put trying to get to chain of custody. Where did something first come? Where was it found? And boy, if you can take a TV crew back to a latitude, longitude, and find something that has been presented as real, that's the beginning of doing an honest story. So chain of custody, all of you everywhere in the world, no matter what is brought to you as this is a phenomena, a high strangeness, a mystery, start there. Always ask yourself, where is the latitude, longitude? How deep? Water? How far? Witnesses, photographs, videos, before anything goes on the web. It would save us a lot of time. Let's see. Do we have time for one more?
Here you go. Could you please ask Terry, or do you know, did he start getting sick after whatever was in his leg was removed?
He went through a period of time that was oh, I see. You want me to have it here. Okay. So what we're trying to do is solve this problem of people not hearing you. So I'm going to just hold this.
Okay, I'll go ahead and say it again
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
Could you please ask Terry, or do you know, did he start getting sick after whatever was in his leg was removed?
He, without question, he had everything in his body after the warning from the alien. And he, at the beginning, wasn't sure. He was not taking it seriously. And then in the morning, on this particular morning after that visit, which I believe was I'll have to double check. I think it was a month later. It might have been 2 weeks later. He said when he woke up, every part of his body, he felt sick. He felt terrible. And he said, it was in my head. They're gone. They came. They took them. And that's when that day he went to the chiropractor, said he hurt all over and that he knew that something had happened, and that's why he asked to get the x-ray that we don't have, which Terry is going to see if he can get those too, to compare that here's the floret and here is the metal in the x-rays that do have chain of custody and are real. And then he had a chiropractor when they were gone who took the same type of photos, and there was nothing there. And there was no surface abrasion. There was nothing on his skin where the objects would have been taken somehow. But then we're back to molecular, like the molecular surgery. But I think that Terry, and it would be a good question to ask him again, I think he associates the fact that he's gone through physical pain in his body that he relates to certain interactions. And we're all trying to understand the impact of terahertz frequencies on the human body and mind since Rendlesham and John Burroughs' experiences and his open heart surgery, that it is very clear that terahertz frequencies are part of the world of what the British call UAPs and Americans call UFOs. And that what terahertz frequencies can or cannot do to a human mind, to a human body, and what are the consequences, that is something that all of us are trying to understand. And I don't think that we in the civilian population have honest, straightforward answers. But Lori and Brad and the audience, I hope that you will feel the same way I do tonight, that by being able to come together like this on Wednesdays, and every once in a while, my being able to go into the back, we'll call it behind the scenes, of how difficult this work is, and how much I hope all of you listening understand that there is a reason, a really firm reason to come forward. Get in touch with me through proton mail, through handwritten mail, through FedEx, at conferences, if you have solid information. Because this seems to me to be clear that you and I and people around the world, we're sort of like a wave, and it's rising, and it's getting higher. And if we all keep trying to understand the truth and report the facts, maybe that wave alone is going to bring the pressure that will bring that headline that I've been waiting for so long, that we're not alone in this universe and never have been. And that all kinds of intelligences have interacted in this solar system, and our government knows it. I don't think that's scary. I think that's exciting. I want to know everything I can possibly learn and report it to you. And I look forward to your emails and your feedback, and those of you who can be whistleblowers, and we'll be back, let's see, next Wednesday, Lori, we might as well talk about that. I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to be doing new work for Ancient Aliens. And so next Wednesday, I think it would be difficult for me, even on the road or long distance. So let's plan that the Wednesday after, that we will be doing something really, really interesting on my YouTube channel, and that all of you will know that every once in a while I do have to go on the road, and that Ancient Aliens, I've been doing, this is our 12th season. We're working on some really, really fascinating stories. You will love them, and they will be out next fall. So that's about next Wednesday. But outside of that, outside of traveling for doing some of these TV projects and every once in a while conferences, we will keep trying to do Wednesday nights as regularly as possible and unfolding what I learn and what I also learn from all of you. Thank you so much.